Oh, come away in, come in. Oh, good to see you again after all this time. I'm so sorry it's been so long. Come in, come in. Now, I've been off and away in America and Canada and all over the place. Look, I got this very beautiful Peterson Rosslare in Seattle, amazingly. Think of it, travelling from Dublin to Seattle and then travelling back with me. Anyway, I tell you what, we'll do something nice. I've just received in the post a new edition, a wonderful new critical edition of a favourite book, An Orkney Tapestry. I'll show you the original and then show you the difference with this one. It's so good when a thing you think of as a classic that's accompanied you through all your adult life. And suddenly there's this younger generation of sort of brilliant students and editors, and they find it too, and it's reprinted and it has notes, and you think, oh good, you know, the thing's been passed on to another generation. Now here, if we look up here, here's the edition, George Mackay Brown, An Orkney Tapestry, which, it's accompanied me in many places. I've sort of had it in my pockets. It was 50p it was. The book was originally published by Gallant's with his lovely drawings by Sylvia Wishart in 1969, and then this is a kind of 1973 paperback. Anyway, look, I tell you what, since we're going to read about Orkney, we're just going to celebrate George Mackay Brown as an Orkney poet and this astonishing, very idiosyncratic guide to Orkney. We could indulge ourselves and we could have a drop of Orkney malt. This is the nice box when Highland Park comes and it says Highland Park 10-year-old Viking Scars single malt Scotch whisky. And they've got this whole thing. I don't know, they've been reading George Mackay Brown as well. Viking Scars, it says, centuries ago, long before Orkney became part of Scotland, it belonged to a vast Viking kingdom. Does that shape the character of our whisky? Well, without a shadow of doubt. Well, that remains to be seen. But I tell you what, it's a lovely bottle, all this lovely sort of knotwork on it. Let's enjoy George Mackay Brown as he should be enjoyed, with a drop. These are the lovely whisky glasses that my friend and spiritual director gave me on the occasion of my 60th birthday. And one of them says poet and the other says priest. It's a bit random as to which is which. Let's see whether you get poet or priest. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you poet and I'll take priest. And we'll sit down for a minute. Sláinte. There you go. So, yeah, have a seat. So why am I... It's running out of juice, this thing. I'm probably not going to like. But perhaps this as well. No. Why am I so keen on this particular book and so glad to get this handy new edition of it, edited by Lyndon Bickett and Kerstin McHugh. I was hoping to meet one of the editors actually when I was lecturing up in Edinburgh, but she couldn't make the lecture. Well, here's a little comment from Seamus Heaney on the front cover of the new edition. He transforms everything by passing it through the eye of the needle of Orkney. He's one of those poets who's absolutely rooted in the place that he's in and loves every inch of its ground and knows its long history and feels everything through it. And yet, paradoxically, the more, if you like, local and parochial he is, the more kind of universal and beautiful his themes become. And I've got several volumes of his poetry. But this is, if you like, prose poetry. And it has actual poems as well, of course. So he was commissioned. He was, an impoverished writer in Orkney, and he got this commission from a fairly big publisher, Gallant's, to write a sort of guidebook to Orkney. And they thought, he's a local chap. He's a good writer. He's published some poetry and some articles and a little column in the Herald. He'll be fine. They thought they were going to get a sort of, handy gazetteer, and here's the map, and, go down to Jock's for your groceries and this kind of thing. But they didn't know what they'd bargained for. They got this amazing hymn to the island, which does indeed contain lots of useful information and is a very good book to take with you if you happen to be going to Orkney. But it's quite another thing. It's quite different from... So to give you an example, talking about that Viking background to Orkney, which we celebrate, by the way, cheers. Here's to our return after a long break to these spells in the study. So it's divided into various chapters about various places, and then about the lore and the history and the poets of Orkney and so on. The wonderful chapter on the weather. But he's got a particular love of a place called Racwick, which is a tiny little bay or inlet, which is completely deserted, and it's got a few. It was depopulated, and it's got a few ruined old crofters' huts. And he starts with a description of the place, which is you'd scarcely think was there to attract tourists. Other roads branch westward towards the hills into utter desolation, a place of kestrels and peat bogs. One thinks of the psalmist in his vale of death, in Psalm 23. After miles the road ends abruptly at a glint of sea and the farm of Glen. The dark hills are still all around, but they hold in their scarred hands a green valley. This is Racwick. The bowl is tilted seawards, its lip is a curving bay. Half huge round sea-sculptured boulders, half sand. Out in the bay, like guardians, stand two huge cliffs, the Snook and the Two. A burn, having gathered its waters from the surrounding hills, fed with small tinkling tributaries, moves slowly through the valley. It deepens into a reflective pool and rushes, foaming at the sea, over a ravelment of round boulders. That's great writing. After a heavy rainfall, the stepping stones are awash. And then suddenly, having described it as empty and the poignancy of its emptiness, it's as though there's a time shift. It's as though he suddenly brings you into an intense description of the first Viking longship, the early Viking settlers. Having looked at the ruins of the last settlers of this place, he imagines the very first settlers coming to it. And he does it towards noon. They came to Racwick. Towards noon they came to Racwick, and then suddenly he turns into this wonderful, alliterative sort of Nordic-style poetry. Beach shineth in blackness, after hard voyage a hidden valley, hills for bees to be hived, beasts kept, a cod-hungry boat, a comfort of fire in the crofts. We furled sail, set firm our feet, stone laid against stone, laboured long till ebb of light. Hungry men round a dead hearth, dreamed I that darkness of horse, harp, a hallowed harvest. And then there's a description of the really difficult first winter and just living off the crabs and the limpets and waiting for the first corn to grow and the beginnings of the settlement. And then he talks about how they come to their hallows. These are Christian Vikings. These are early Christian Vikings and they've got a feeling for Our Lady and the sense of her as the Lady of the Sea. And they make this primitive carving of Our Lady of Racwick and bring it into the chapel, and she becomes there to sort of bless the boats. And there's a wonderful invocation to her that he imagines them making: Our Lady of the Boat, Our Lady of Oil and Salt, Our Lady of the Inshore, Our Lady of the Silver Dancers, Our Lady of Nets, Our Lady of the Atlantic, Star of the Sea. And then he talks about how the priest comes, the trained Christian priest, to tell them more of the stories of Christ. Twice or thrice a year a priest would come and say a mass in the chapel. He would baptize the infants, anoint the old sick people, marry those who were troubled with the fires of lust. Afterwards he would read the gospel to them, the miracles and the parables, and how Christ loved the poor more than the rich. The chief got red in the face and shifted in his seat whenever the priest said that. But into the crofter's sackcloth the life of Christ wove richness and beauty. The mason made stations of the cross for the chapel, putting blue and red clay and egg yolk among the shallow scratchings of 14 stones, so that the Passion of Christ along 3 walls of the church was like the year-long labour of a crofter, from furrow to loaf and ale, and the cross a ploughshare. Veronica, a croft girl risen in pity from her spinning wheel, lance and sword became the harvest sickles, the flagellating flails, the grinding millstones, and black oxen of execution. The last stone, tabernacle of birth and death and resurrection. From it issues forever the bread of heaven. So there's no praise. And then he suddenly, out of nowhere, gives you almost like little haikus. Here, by the way, are Sylvia Wishart's beautiful illustrations to the whole book. Fantastic. Yeah. Rackwick Valley is the issue. The boats at Rackwick. So let me just read you. It's quite short, but I find it astonishingly evocative poetry. His Rackwick stations, his little poetic evocations, and you'll see how the 14 stations, the traditional story of the Via Dolorosa, the God who comes to die and promises resurrection, completely become kind of embedded in and deeply rooted in this earthy, sea-ish kind of gritty life of the fisherman and the crofter. So it starts, of course, the stations start with the condemnation. Condemnation. The winter jar of honey and grain is a Lenten urn. Cross. Lord, it is time, take our yoke and sunwards turn. First fall. To drudge in furrows till you drop is to be born. Mother of God, out of the mild mothering hill and the chaste burn. Simon, God begun, the barley rack by man is born. Veronica, foldings of women, your harrow sweat darkens her yarn. Second fall, sower and seed, one flesh, you fling from stone to thorn. Women of Jerusalem, you are bound for the kingdom of death, the enfolded women mourn. Third fall, scythes are sharpened to bring you down, King Barleycorn. The stripping, flails creak, golden coat from kernel is torn. The crucifixion, the fruitful stones thunder around, quern on quern. You know, the quern is the great stone that you grind your grain with to make not only your bread, but also this. Death, the last black hunger rages through you with hoof and horn. Pieta, mother, fold him from those furrows, your broken bairn. And then sepulchre. And here we'll see the sepulchre becoming, as it were, the place of resurrection and incarnation. Sepulchre. Shepherd, angel, king are kneeling, look, at the door of the barn. And these wonderful turns. Do you see the end? Like turn, born, burn, born, yarn, thorn, mourn, barleycorn, torn, quern, horn, bairn, barn. Those are the great sounds that each of these come round with. Well, you can imagine how Gallants felt when they were sort of expecting a handy tourist guide to Orkney and they got an immortal work of poetry. But good on them, they published it, and it's since come to be regarded as a classic. And now, as I say, this has got wonderful, it's got really helpful notes, it's following up for everybody all the biblical references, referring to other books on Orkney, very fine introduction. Still got those lovely Sylvia Wishart drawings. So I'm really, you know, every so often it's really good to have two editions of a book. You know, the one that you had to begin with, and then the one you're so glad to have now, because it tells you that the book is alive and being passed on to another generation, and that's hugely encouraging. Anyway, I think there's a bit of Mackay Brown's poetry out there on the web and things, and it's so hard to find everything now. Somewhere among my slim volumes of modern poetry, I've got a couple of hardback volumes of his, you know, his actual books of poetry, and if I come across one of them, I'll get it out for you, and we'll have a read of that as well. But you could do a lot worse than dipping into An Orkney Tapestry. It's a classic, in my view. Anyway, so nice to see you again. I'm sorry it's been so long. It's lunch.